It begins not with a discovery, but with a silence. Across deserts, under oceans, beneath layers of ice and earth, evidence has whispered of a world far older, far more complex than the timelines etched in our textbooks. But those whispers rarely reach the podiums of institutions or the pages of our official histories. Instead, they lie buried, sometimes literally, often politically. This is not a story of conspiracy. It's a story of forgetting, of the uncomfortable space where knowledge meets power, where a finding too strange or too early becomes not a revelation, but a problem. In the 20th century alone, 10 scientific expeditions encountered findings that cracked open long-settled theories of our origins. Footprints in stone that should not have existed, cities lost beneath the Amazon, hidden by vines and policy alike, navigational relics that placed ancient sailors far across oceans thousands of years before their time. Each expedition began with curiosity. Most ended in silence. Why? Why would evidence, documented, measured, preserved, be set aside? Perhaps because every institution, scientific or not, builds itself on foundations. Dislodge one stone and the entire structure trembles. What these discoveries suggest is not just that history is longer or more diverse than we imagined, but that progress may not be linear. That knowledge rises and falls, as do civilizations. That the past may hold blueprints not only for survival, but for a kind of intelligence we've long since abandoned. There are patterns here: suppressed funding, reassigned research, artifacts that vanish from archives, scientists who vanish from curriculum. It's not one field, it's many. Anthropology, paleontology, climatology, geology, all touched by anomalies deemed too disruptive for acceptance. But this series is not about scandal. It's about reimagining. We invite you to walk with us through the dust of forgotten temples, dive with sonar into sunken cities, and hold in your mind the impossible truths uncovered in the ice. What if human history isn't a straight road, but a labyrinth? What if we've been here before, advanced, connected, aware, only to fall and rise again? And what if the future depends not on invention, but on memory? This is the journey we begin now, not into fantasy, but into possibility. A documentary unfolding across 14 chapters, each pulling back the curtain on one discovery, one expedition, one place where the Earth tried to tell us a different story. A story not of alien hands or magical worlds, but of human hands, ancient ones, brilliant ones. Let us begin where all great histories do, in the footprints left behind. It started in the shallow waters of Texas, along a winding stretch of the Paluxy River. The summer of 1938 had dried the riverbeds, exposing something strange etched into the Cretaceous limestone, something that looked unmistakably human. Dr. Roland Bird, a paleontologist from the American Museum of Natural History, arrived expecting to debunk local rumors. Giant man-like tracks walking beside dinosaur footprints. A tall tale, surely. He came with the skepticism of a scientist and the quiet hope of a discoverer. But what he found turned certainty to doubt. Embedded in 100-million-year-old rock were human footprints, dozens of them. Some measured over 20 inches long, spaced apart with the unmistakable rhythm of a natural gait. Arches, heel strikes, toes splayed by weight and motion. Not carved, not faked. They bore the compression of living movement. And they walked alongside the three-toed tracks of massive theropod dinosaurs, weaving a haunting dance of coexistence that should not, by all accepted theory, have been possible. The sediment told no lies. The prints were preserved in the same geological layer, their depth and preservation identical. Bird documented everything. He made casts. He wrote reports. But what followed was not celebration. It was dismissal. The museum refused to display the prints. Byrd's reputation did little to sway the tide. Other independent scientists who examined the site confirmed the findings, but paid the price in careers cut short, research defunded, and names erased from academic circles. One geologist, Dr. Seal Dougherty, lost tenure for publishing support of the track's authenticity. The site, unprotected, became the target of vandals. Many of the clearest prints were destroyed. The casts Byrd had made? Gone, quietly removed from collections, locked away, forgotten. Today, tourists can visit the Paluxy River where some remnants remain. But serious scientific investigation is discouraged, quietly starved of funding and support. And the question lingers. If humans and dinosaurs truly walked side by side, what does that say about our understanding of time, of evolution, of ourselves? Maybe it's easier not to ask. Easier to say, it must be a mistake. To turn away from what we don't expect to see. But history, real history, isn't obligated to fit our expectations. Sometimes it leaves footprints, and sometimes the truth walks beside us, unnoticed, until the river runs dry. Beneath the blue expanse of the Mediterranean, silence hides a forgotten geometry. Between 1955 and 1968, a team from Columbia University set out to map the seafloor. It was a purely geological endeavor. No ambitions of rewriting history, just sonar readings and ocean currents. But what they found under the waves defied the natural order. Straight lines, perfect angles. Grid-like city blocks submerged hundreds of feet below sea level. Artificial structures spread across vast basins. Walls, harbors, roadways, stretching for miles with a precision no natural formation could mimic. Dr. Bruce Heen, leading the marine geology program, expected to chart ancient coastlines. Instead, his instruments revealed sunken cities with central plazas, drainage systems, and harbor defenses. There were signs of temples and palaces. These were not accidental formations. They were planned, engineered, lived in. And their depth told a chilling story. These cities were built when sea levels were 400 feet lower during the last ice age, some 12,000 years ago, long before Sumer or Egypt, long before we believed cities had even been conceived. When the team tried to publish their findings, resistance came fast and hard. Archaeological authorities rejected the notion outright. Complex urban life, they insisted, could not have existed before 5000 BCE. The sonar data was shelved, the research reclassified. Access to the findings was sealed. Independent marine archaeologists who tried to explore further found themselves blocked, denied funding, denied access, denied voice. Subsequent ocean surveys, curiously, avoided the very regions where Columbia's sonar had found the most compelling structures. The official maps now show only geological anomalies. But there are patterns beneath the surface. Cities lost not only to the rising seas, but to the rising walls of academic orthodoxy. What do we lose when we refuse to look deeper? What civilizations might have thrived along shores we now consider myth? And what if Atlantis was never a legend, but a memory? The sea does not forget. It preserves, entombs, waits. And sometimes it reveals, if only for a moment, what we were never meant to find again. In the heart of Antarctica, where the ice swallows time, something ancient stirred beneath the surface. It was 1980, and an international team of scientists drilled deep into the polar ice to reconstruct the planet's climate history. Among them was Dr. Elena Petrov, leading the Soviet contingent. Their mission was clear: extract core samples, analyze atmospheric records, piece together Earth's glacial past. But what emerged from 400,000-year-old ice wasn't just compressed air or volcanic ash. It was life, tropical life. Palm fronds, ferns, flowering plants, perfectly preserved and impossible. Fossils embedded in glacial layers supposedly formed during one of Earth's coldest periods. The samples were intact enough for cellular analysis. No contamination, no mistake. The plants required warmth, sun, and rain, none of which had touched Antarctica in millions of years, according to accepted models. And it wasn't just plants. Pollen samples revealed entire ecosystems, tropical insects, fertile soils, warm marine species. A vibrant world frozen in time where none should have existed. The implications were seismic. If Antarctica was once warm and lush while the rest of the planet froze, then everything we believed about climate history, ice ages, continental drift, atmospheric cycles was up for debate, but the questions never reached the public. Petrov's reports were quietly classified by the Soviet Academy, the plant samples locked away. International partners were instructed to omit any mention of tropical fossils from their publications. NASA researchers involved in the project were told to focus solely on data that supported established climate models. The drill site was later designated a protected environmental zone. No further research allowed. The past, it seemed, was too dangerous. Today, modern climate reconstructions make no mention of those tropical remnants. They don't fit the story. But the ice remembers. It remembers a time when Antarctica bloomed, when the poles turned green, and when the climate danced to rhythms we still don't understand. What does it mean if the Earth has rewritten itself before? And if it has, what are we really standing on now? A stable world or a stage set for transformation? Buried beneath miles of ice lies not just ancient flora, but a challenge. To accept that what we call impossible may simply be what we have not yet understood. The ocean is vast, but it does not forget. In 1970, Norwegian explorer Thor Heyerdahl embarked on a bold voyage aboard a reed boat named Ra 2. His goal was to prove that ancient civilizations, using primitive materials and ancient techniques, could have crossed oceans long before recorded history allowed. He succeeded. Ra 2 made the transatlantic journey using only winds, currents, and ancient knowledge. But the voyage revealed more than possibility. It uncovered traces of a lost reality. Along the way, Heyerdahl's team documented strange markers on remote islands, stone structures aligned to stars, carved harbors cut into rock, and signal platforms positioned with mathematical precision. These were not random anomalies. They were waypoints designed to guide. They spoke of a system, a network of navigation older than any known map. Barnacle samples collected during the trip held yet another secret. Marine life from different continents had intermixed, genetically entwined. The only explanation? Ancient ships ferrying more than just humans, carrying ecosystems across oceans again and again. It wasn't just one journey. It was trade, exchange, contact. Artifacts found on the islands, tools, storage facilities, even astronomical observatories told of ancient peoples who had mastered the seas, who understood the stars, the tides, the shape of the earth. These weren't isolated islanders. They were navigators, engineers, cartographers of a world we never knew existed. But when Heyerdahl tried to share these findings, the silence was swift. Institutions dismissed the structures as natural formations. Proposals to explore them were denied. International maritime laws labeled the locations culturally sensitive, blocking further investigation. The narrative had to remain intact, that ancient people were primitive, isolated, bound to their lands. Global contact? Trade routes spanning continents before the compass? Impossible. Yet Ra 2 had floated across time itself. And the evidence gathered pointed to a history far older, far more connected. Today, those markers still stand, weathered, unacknowledged, but resolute. What would it mean to accept that the world was once a single, humming network of human curiosity and movement? What if our ancestors weren't bound by geography, but empowered by it? And what if, in the rhythm of waves and the whisper of the wind, they left behind a map not of where they had been, but of where we still might go? The Sahara was not always sand and silence. In the late 1970s, a joint French-Algerian archaeological team led by Henri Lot journeyed deep into the desert to study ancient rock art. But beneath the dunes, ground-penetrating radar revealed something unexpected: massive structures hidden beneath centuries of shifting earth. What they uncovered shattered every expectation. Stone cities emerged from the sand, complete with paved streets, complex drainage systems, multi-story buildings, and plazas arranged with the precision of modern urban planning. The engineering defied belief. Climate-controlled interiors using passive airflow, sewage systems that carried waste away from living spaces, and walls aligned to celestial movements with mathematical exactness. Carbon dating pushed their origin to 8000 BCE, thousands of years before the first Egyptian pyramid had risen from the Nile. These were not nomads. They were architects of permanence. The team found astronomical observatories encoded into the city's layout. Buildings aligned with solstices, lunar phases, and the rising of constellations long forgotten. This was science in stone, a civilization whose understanding of the stars matched that of cultures millennia later. Agricultural evidence painted a vivid picture of a green Sahara, irrigated with complex waterworks, underground cisterns, aqueducts carved through stone, and crop systems rotated to sustain life in a harsh but then fertile land. And in workshops beneath the ruins, metallurgical tools revealed knowledge of alloy production, precision casting, and decorative artistry. High-temperature furnaces, chemical treatment of ores, ornamental design, technology far beyond what official timelines assigned to that era or region. When Lotta's team tried to publish, the reaction was swift and suppressive. Egyptian authorities, fearing a challenge to their cultural primacy, intervened. The French government sealed the data. The sites were quietly declared protected zones, off-limits to international research. Universities pulled funding. Independent archaeologists found permits revoked. Satellite imagery today still reveals geometric anomalies beneath the sand, matching the lost city's dimensions. But ground investigation remains forbidden. And so the desert, once a cradle of complexity, is now a vault of buried memory. What does it mean when the origin of civilization shifts southward? What stories are lost when the truth threatens the pride of nations? And how many times must a city be buried before we remember it was ever there at all? In the frozen vastness of the Arctic, where life clings to the edges of possibility, a discovery lay trapped in time. It was 1973 when Dr. James Mitchell led a multinational research team to study permafrost layers in search of ancient climate data. They were prepared to read the history of ice, of weather, of glacial advance and retreat, but instead they found something human: tools, carvings, fragments of clothing and shelter, objects made not by nature but by hands, skilled, knowing, deliberate. And these artifacts weren't recent. Radiocarbon dating placed them at 45,000 years old, 30,000 years before the supposed arrival of humans in the Americas via the Bering Land Bridge. The tools showed expert craftsmanship, flint-knapped blades with symmetrical precision, composite implements made from stone, bone, and sinew bound with adhesives that survived millennia in ice. Decorative patterns hinted at symbolic thought, at culture, tradition, identity. The permafrost had preserved organic materials as well: textiles, leather, even fragments of boat hulls. That's what truly unsettled the narrative: boats. In the Arctic, at the peak of an ice age, these ancient peoples had not only survived, they had mastered the cold. Evidence showed they hunted mammoths and adapted to sub-zero temperatures with techniques still mirrored in indigenous practices today. More startling were the signs of maritime travel: waterproofed planks, flexible hull designs, and sails that caught more than just wind. They caught the imagination. Navigation tools suggested they had crossed frozen seas, mapping coastlines, migrating not by land bridges but by ocean routes carved into ice. But this new story never made it into textbooks. When Mitchell's team submitted their findings, institutions recoiled. Theories of human migration, carefully built, deeply defended, were not to be disturbed. Funding vanished. Research was reclassified. The artifacts were locked away, and the site itself was designated a protected area, closed to further excavation. Today, Arctic migration studies omit the data entirely. Maps still show the Bering Strait as the only point of entry. But the ice remembers differently. It remembers a time when the cold was not a barrier, but a road. A time when humans were not wandering primitives, but explorers, adaptable, inventive, bold. What if we didn't just cross into the Americas by foot, but by sea? What if the roots of our journey stretch farther back than we're willing to admit? And what if those roots still lie beneath the ice, waiting for us to look again? Beneath the bustling streets of modern London, another city sleeps. In 1987, during the construction of the Jubilee Line extension, engineers uncovered far more than expected. As teams drilled deep into the earth to make way for new tunnels, they hit something that didn't belong. An ancient structure, too deep, too precise, too sophisticated. Dr. Margaret Foster, assigned to oversee the archaeological aspects of the project, quickly realized this was no Roman ruin. It predated Roman Londinium by thousands of years. What they found were tunnels carved with mathematical perfection. Smooth, circular bores more advanced than anything from the known ancient world. The ventilation systems were especially remarkable. Air still moved through the shafts in a balanced flow, suggesting intentional engineering. Chambers connected in deliberate sequences. Drainage channels fed into underground reservoirs. The city beneath the city had been designed, not stumbled into. Analysis of the stonework revealed techniques unknown to Iron Age Britain, precision cuts that required metal tools of incredible hardness and control. No hammer and chisel could have shaped these forms. Load-bearing arches and support columns followed structural principles not fully understood until the Industrial Age. This was urban infrastructure, hidden for millennia beneath one of the world's most modern capitals. As the investigation deepened, connections to natural cave systems and subterranean rivers became evident. The ancient builders had mapped and integrated the geography, creating a hybrid city both natural and engineered. Flood control systems, storage chambers, even gathering spaces hinted at a thriving society that understood geology and hydrology on an expert level. But there was a problem. A city this advanced, this old, didn't fit anywhere in Britain's accepted history. When Foster compiled her findings for publication, she faced pressure to redact. British archaeological authorities intervened, fearing that such revelations would challenge the established narrative of Roman supremacy in urban planning. Development plans were altered to bypass the deepest discoveries. The ancient passages were sealed again, quietly, permanently. Today, commuters ride trains just feet above a forgotten civilization. Most will never know what lies beneath, but the earth remembers. And so does the stone. What if the first great city of Britain wasn't built by invaders, but by ancestors? What if civilization has bloomed and withered in the same places more than once? And what does it mean that our deepest roots may lie in darkness, not light? Hidden not by time, but by our reluctance to remember. The Amazon rainforest pulses with life, but it also holds echoes, traces of a forgotten human world hidden beneath the canopy. In 1999, Dr. Anna Clark led an international team to survey deforestation in Brazil using advanced satellite imaging and ground-penetrating radar. The mission was ecological. But the images returned were not of forest loss alone, they were of revelation. Beneath the trees, patterns emerged, perfect circles, straight lines stretching for miles, massive geometric shapes impossible to dismiss as natural. As the team analyzed the data, a buried civilization began to reveal itself. Urban networks spread across thousands of square miles. Clark's team uncovered traces of roads connecting cities, agricultural terraces carved into hillsides, raised fields designed to survive floods, and canal systems flowing with mathematical precision. They identified structures resembling temples, plazas, residential zones, even manufacturing centers. These were not tribal villages. These were cities. Ground verification confirmed the satellite imagery. The mounds and shapes were human-made earthworks, engineered with knowledge of soil mechanics, climate adaptation, and long-term sustainability. In many cases, the construction techniques outperformed modern efforts in durability and environmental harmony. The agriculture was especially striking. Ancient farmers had transformed the acidic rainforest soil into terra preta, rich, dark earth that could support dense populations without depleting the ecosystem. Biodiversity thrived. Fish ponds and forest gardens coexisted with housing, proving that the forest was not untouched wilderness, but a carefully curated environment. Population estimates soared. Millions, perhaps tens of millions, once lived in these lost cities. Long before European ships arrived on the continent's shores, the Amazon had been a cradle of human ingenuity. But when Clark prepared to publish, resistance formed. Environmental organizations, fearing the impact on conservation narratives, pressured institutions to downplay the findings. Brazilian authorities classified key satellite data. International research proposals were rejected. The story of a once thriving Amazonian civilization was buried, this time not by soil, but by silence. Today, maps show the rainforest as wild and untouched. But just beneath the surface, the lines of memory remain. What if the Amazon was not merely survived, but mastered? What if human civilization once flourished not in opposition to nature, but in partnership with it? And what if in the patterns beneath the trees lies a blueprint for the future we've forgotten to imagine? Far beneath the waves of the North Sea, where oil rigs now stand like sentinels, something unexpected lies buried in the silt, the remnants of a world drowned by time. In the 1980s, as offshore drilling expanded, geologists and engineers began pulling up core samples from deep beneath the sea floor. Among them was Dr. Robert Hansen, whose job was to analyze sediments for commercial viability. But what he found was not just rock and fossil. It was evidence of human life, where none should exist. Worked stone tools, shards of pottery, carved wooden fragments, even traces of metal objects, all pulled from depths that hadn't seen the sky since the end of the last ice age, 12,000 to 15,000 years ago. At that time, the North Sea was not a sea, but a vast landscape known to scientists as Doggerland, a stretch of fertile plains that connected Britain to mainland Europe. What Hansen's team uncovered painted a picture of advanced settlement. Foundations of buildings aligned to cardinal points, engineered harbor structures with breakwaters and defensive earthworks sprawling across submerged plateaus. The scale and design suggested not isolated tribes, but complex societies. Further analysis showed knowledge of metallurgy, copper and tin alloyed with precision. There were signs of artistic expression, too, carvings, ornaments, abstract symbols etched into stone. But the timeline didn't fit. According to prevailing theories, humans of that era were primitive, just beginning to farm. The idea of organized coastal cities with navigation systems and metallurgy was unthinkable. So when Hansen submitted his findings, the backlash was swift. Archaeological authorities labeled the artifacts out of context. Oil companies, fearing delays and regulations, downplayed discoveries. Maritime archaeologists were denied access under claims of technical infeasibility. The core samples were quietly reclassified and research ceased. Today, drilling continues. Pipelines run through once inhabited land, now waterlogged and forgotten. But the sea remembers. It remembers a people who built cities along ancient shores, who watched the waters rise and did not run, but adapted, until the waves swallowed everything. What if the story of Northern Europe does not begin with wandering bands, but with a civilization washed away. What have we lost to rising seas, and what stories still rest beneath the tide, waiting for us to listen? Australia holds time differently. Its stones are old, its cultures older still. But in the 1980s, that timeline stretched further back than anyone had imagined. Between 1985 and 1990, Dr. Rhys Jones and his team embarked on a project to reassess the age of Aboriginal settlement using thermoluminescence dating, a technique more precise than radiocarbon when dealing with ancient materials. What they discovered reframed not just Australian history, but human history itself. Artifacts from Aboriginal sites across the continent began returning dates of 60,000 to 80,000 years. Tools, hearths, decorated stones, evidence of camps, of fire, of life, carved into the bones of the land tens of thousands of years before the earliest known civilizations elsewhere. The findings upended every accepted model of human migration. If accurate, they meant that Aboriginal peoples had arrived not just earlier, but with the technological and cultural complexity to survive and thrive across some of the harshest terrains on Earth. The artifacts told their own story: stone blades with precision edges, paints made from complex mixtures used in sacred art that survives to this day. Signs of astronomy encoded in ceremonial sites, alignments to solstices and lunar cycles, a long memory of the stars. Even more stunning were linguistic patterns suggesting continuous cultural transmission across millennia, implying not a static culture, but one evolving through deep time, adapting, innovating, enduring. And yet, when Jones prepared to publish, the resistance came quickly. Anthropological institutions argued the results must be flawed. Peer review turned into silent stonewalling. The Australian government, wary of legal implications for Indigenous land rights, restricted site access and downplayed the findings. Funding dried up. Jones's research team disbanded. The narrative reasserted itself. Aboriginal arrival around 50,000 years ago, no more, no less. But the land knows. It holds the heat of ancient fires, the wear of countless footsteps, the echo of song lines stretching back through time. What if the world's oldest living culture is older still? What if history's deepest roots are not in Mesopotamia or Egypt, but in the red earth and dreaming skies of Australia? And what does it say about us, that we fear not the past's complexity, but its continuity? Some truths lie not in what we discover, but in what we choose to forget. In 1938, along the Paluxy River in Texas, a quiet revolution in stone unfolded. Human footprints, anatomically correct, proportioned, deliberate, were found embedded in the same Cretaceous limestone as dinosaur tracks. They walked side by side, step for step, as if the two had met not just in myth, but in time. Paleontologist Dr. Roland Bird documented over 100 such impressions. He measured them, cast them, followed their patterns with the care of a scientist and the awe of a man staring into the impossible. But Bird's findings, like many that followed, were not welcomed. They were rejected, not by evidence, but by expectation. Time and again, scientific expeditions uncovered truths that did not fit. Cities beneath the Mediterranean, temples under the Amazon, tools in the Arctic, roads beneath the Sahara, structures under London's soil, fossils of warmth in the ice. The pattern was clear: not one discovery, not one mistake, but a cascade of revelations that together formed a deeper truth, that human history is not a straight line, but a cycle of brilliance and collapse, of memory and erasure. And yet every time the past opened its hand, it was slapped closed. Institutions denied, funding vanished. Researchers silenced. Artifacts disappeared. What connects these stories is not a grand conspiracy, but something more human: our fear of rewriting the map. Because to accept that ancient civilizations were advanced, that timelines are wrong, that knowledge was lost and rediscovered, would be to admit that our place in history is less certain than we believe. We crave linearity, progress, certainty, but history doesn't care for such comforts. It rises, it falls, it whispers through ruins. It calls from beneath the sand, the sea, the ice. What if we are not the pinnacle, but one point in a repeating arc? What if forgetting is not a flaw, but a feature of our story? And what if remembering, truly remembering, is the first step toward becoming something more than just the inheritors of silence? Some discoveries don't rewrite history, they restore it. In 1985, a thermoluminescent scan of ancient Aboriginal sites challenged every boundary of human migration theory. By 1999, satellite images revealed city-sized settlements buried beneath the Amazon, proving that rainforests once pulsed with millions of human lives. Meanwhile, engineers in London unearthed tunnels predating Rome. Arctic explorers found maritime tools in Ice Age permafrost. And sonar in the Mediterranean traced submerged cities lost to rising seas. Each of these finds, taken alone, could be explained away. Anomalies, curiosities, errors in measurement. Together, they form a constellation, one that points not to isolated brilliance, but to something larger, a forgotten pattern of human potential that surged and receded across millennia. What emerges is the silhouette of a different story. That civilization is not a singular invention, but a recurring expression. That knowledge, once thought linear, may be cyclical. That we have risen high before and fallen only to rise again in different forms, on different shores. There's humility in this realization, and awe. For every piece of evidence buried or suppressed, there are still more waiting beneath our feet and oceans. We are walking on the bones of forgotten worlds, some erased by cataclysm, others buried by time, and many more quietly sealed by the discomfort of admitting we might not be the first to understand, to build, to wonder. These chapters are not about proving conspiracies, they're about restoring curiosity, about listening where we've learned to dismiss, about recognizing that the past does not belong to any single story. If the Amazon once hosted sustainable megacities, what does that teach us about ecology? If Antarctica once bloomed with tropical life, what do we truly know about climate? If ancient mariners crossed oceans long before recorded history, how deep do our roots of connection go? And if all of this was possible once, could it be again? The answers are not in textbooks or official timelines. They are in the ruins, the rocks, the shadows under the canopy, and the patterns beneath the waves. On these, we just have to look. And perhaps more importantly, have the courage to see. It ends where it began, with a question. What if history is not a ladder we climb, but a circle we walk? What if progress isn't the forward march we imagine, but a rhythm of ascent and collapse, knowledge gained and lost, remembered and buried? Across these 14 chapters, we've wandered through deserts and jungles, beneath ice sheets and ocean floors, through sealed tunnels and sunken ruins, not seeking spectacle, but seeking memory. Fragments of forgotten brilliance, buried not just by time, but by our own reluctance to listen. Every footprint in stone, every submerged street grid, every fossilized bloom in the cold heart of Antarctica is a whisper. You were not the first, and that is not a condemnation. It's a gift. It reminds us that humanity's potential is not new, that intelligence, creativity, and complexity have surfaced in many forms, in many ages, shaped by different skies and guided by different stars. We are not alone in history. We are part of a legacy of builders and dreamers, of navigators who followed currents before maps, of astronomers who watched stars rise over ancient temples, of engineers who carved cities into the earth and coaxed abundance from forests and sands. Their voices were silenced, their cities buried, their truths shelved and sealed. But they are not gone. They are in the questions we still ask. Who were they? What did they know? Why did they fall? And what warnings or wisdom might they offer? We live in a world obsessed with the new, but perhaps the future we seek was already imagined long ago, in another age, by hands not so different from ours. To remember them is not to challenge science. It is to deepen it, to expand the boundaries of what we consider possible, to replace certainty with wonder, arrogance with humility, and perhaps, most importantly, to remind ourselves that forgetting is a choice, but so is remembering. So we end not with answers, but with an invitation. Look again, question gently, listen deeply, because the past is not behind us, it is beneath us, and some truths are only waiting to be unearthed.